Good evening, this is Tracy Shores, and we just had our first full day of Sukkot. It was a Sabbath day, and I got to talk to the kids about this word temporary. It was the word that the Lord had put just on my mind, and I was thinking, wow, okay, how does this apply? And of course, the scripture came to mind that you shall dwell in temporary shelters. And so not all translations say temporary, but some do. And indeed, when we think about tents, we think about the temporary. And so I spent some time looking at all the different places that tents are in the Bible, and they're mentioned quite a bit. We know a lot of the greats, they lived in tents, and they dwelled in tents. And so, and we know the scripture also talks about this earthly tent that we're in. And when we think of all of these things, we think of the temporary. If you have been camping, you know that tents feel temporary, and indeed they are temporary. And so I wanted to share with you where we really spent most of our time today, and that was looking at chapter 11 in Hebrews, because indeed that's the chapter of faith. And so I'm going to read to you. We know that by faith Enoch and Abel and Abraham and Rahab, Samson, all these greats did things by faith. But there is a recurring theme in there, and it's based on understanding that our sense here, or our dwelling here, is temporary. And we'll see that in just a second. And so it says here about Abraham, it says, by faith Abraham, when called to go up to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And some translations say, to the permanent foundations, had permanent foundations or eternal foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And so I wanted to point out the fact that it says he did obey and indeed go, and he didn't know where he was going, which took a great amount of faith. But then it says that when he made his home in the promised land, because indeed he did get to walk in some of the promise, but he never considered it to be his permanent home. He lived as a stranger, a sojourner, a foreigner. And so I was really pondering the fact that indeed that is just like the epicenter of where we should be, to appreciate and honor and enjoy all the good things that God gives us, the promises fulfilled in this life, but not to count them as the eternal or the permanent, recognizing that there was always something better to look forward to, that there was an enduring city, there was a permanent place for him. And for all of these, it says later, actually in Hebrews here, it says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. And then it says, instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. And it says, therefore, God was not ashamed to call them his children. And so indeed, this time where we dwell in tents, it's just a wonderful picture of the temporal nature of both our physical dwelling and our homes, really. Today we have our homes are very glorified and very modernized here in the United States. And so we can indeed feel a sense of eternal security here, although it's false. But I think, recognizing that indeed this is a temporary place. And I did find another scripture today that I thought, well, to be honest with you, my tent feels a little more like this. It says, my tent is destroyed. All its ropes are snapped. No one is left now to pitch my tent or set up my shelter. And so when I spoke about this theme earlier today, I said that I was heavy-hearted this morning. And to be honest with you, now that I've tried to record this video like 5 or 6 times, and said different things each time. And I listen back to it, and I'm reminded not to put my focus on the temporary, on the temporal, recognizing that I have an enduring city, a lasting city to come. That really, I even was thinking how it's almost like we can't have both. We can't call this our permanent place and have a sense of the future eternal permanent place. It's as if we do the one, we lose sight of the other. And so that's what I find so amazing about Abraham, because he was a man who God did bless. And he was fruitful and he multiplied ultimately, right? That was his promise, that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars of the sky. And not that he saw all of that, but he was well to do. But he had such a sense of God and God's goodness, all the while recognizing that there had to be something more, that he was looking forward to something more. And indeed, all of these people of faith, that seems to be the recurring theme, that they recognize they were sojourners, they were strangers. And so when we celebrate this week of Sukkot, it's as if God is saying to us, please keep that perspective. Please keep the perspective that this is a temporary place for you, and this is your temporary dwelling. And I talked earlier today about thinking about these tent pegs, and then when I looked up the tent pegs, they're described. They were made of bronze, and it talks about the tent pegs along with the cords on the tent. And I'm going to say something about that. I'm going to look at that a little closer in the next couple of days and share something on that. Because I had said earlier today about these tent pegs that we probably do things to make our tent, our temporary dwelling, things that are earthly things that we do to make this dwelling feel more permanent. And we hammer those things into the ground. And I think when I woke this morning, I just felt like I didn't have any really good tent stakes because many things in my life feel uncertain right now and feel shaken. And so I'm having to go to God and say, okay, my tent is feeling very unstable. And indeed, that causes us to say, Lord, I'm looking forward to the eternal place. And I had said this morning that, thank God that Yeshua said, in my Father's house, there's many rooms. And if it weren't so, I wouldn't tell you, but it's true. And that I go there to prepare a place for you.